When I first heard those words from him, I thought he was joking. It was a calm Sunday morning, sunlight dripping through the curtains, the smell of tea still warm in the air. And yet, just like that, one sentence changed everything I believed about my marriage. He said it so casually, like he was telling me the weather forecast. And I remember, the spoon slipped from my hand, clinking against the floor, and all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat, heavy and uneven. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at him, the man I'd shared 12 years of my life with, and wondered if I had misheard. Our house, the one I'd decorated, cleaned, poured my dreams into, the one I'd watched being built brick by brick, under his mother's name? He looked at me then, smiled nervously, and said, "Don't worry, it's just paperwork. Nothing changes for you." But everything changed for me in that moment. Normal life/setup. Before that day, I would have told you my life was ordinary, simple, but happy. I'm Farah, 37 years old, a teacher, a mother of one little boy named Denial. My husband, Saad, was an engineer, quiet and practical, the kind of man who didn't talk much but worked hard. When we first got married, we had almost nothing. We rented a small flat near Gulshan, where the kitchen was barely big enough for 2 people to stand. But those years, they were good. We'd laugh over late-night instant noodles, plan our future, promise each other that one day we'd own a house of our own. And when that day finally came, when we bought that small but beautiful house on the corner street, I felt like we'd made it. I remember the first night there. I didn't even sleep. I just kept walking around, touching the walls, running my fingers along the freshly painted windowsills. It smelled like fresh wood and hope. Saad's mother, though she wasn't easy to please, she had this way of smiling that made you feel small, like she knew something you didn't. When we bought the house, she came to help us move in, and never really left. At first, I didn't mind. She was family. But over time, her presence started feeling heavier, like the air itself grew thick when she entered a room. She criticized everything, the way I cooked, the way I raised Denial, even the color I chose for the curtains. Saad always defended her gently, saying, "She just wants to feel included." So I swallowed my irritation. I told myself I was being ungrateful. I had a house, a husband, a child. What more could I want? But sometimes peace is more valuable than walls. The first clue/suspicion. It began with small things. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between Saad and his mother. Their voices were low, but sharp, like glass breaking behind a closed door. She said, "I told you, this is for your own good. You'll thank me later." And he replied, "Emmy, please not now. Farah will hear." When I walked in, they both went silent. His mother smiled too sweetly and changed the topic. Saad looked nervous, like a boy caught cheating on an exam. That night, I asked him what they were talking about. He kissed my forehead and said, "Just family matters. Nothing serious." And I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something in his eyes, that flicker of guilt, told me otherwise. Over the next few weeks, more signs appeared. His phone started buzzing late at night. He'd step outside to take calls. When I asked, he said it was work. But I knew his company didn't call on weekends. Then one evening, his mother mentioned something strange while talking to her sister on the phone. She said, "Yes, the house papers are safe in my cupboard." My heart skipped a beat. Papers? Which papers? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but a part of me couldn't rest. That night I asked Saad about it directly. He smiled, patted my hand, and said, "Emmy, just keep some documents for safekeeping. You worry too much." Maybe I did. But you know that feeling, when your gut screams something your mind refuses to accept. That was me. I was trying to be the good wife, the trusting one. But every time I looked at him, I felt a thin, invisible wall growing between us. The discovery/betrayal begins. The truth didn't come to me gently. It came like a slap I didn't see coming. A month later, Saad left early for work. His mother had gone to visit her sister. I was cleaning the bedroom when I noticed his briefcase under the bed. Half open, papers spilling out. Normally, I wouldn't touch his things. But that day, I don't know what pushed me. Maybe intuition. Maybe pain disguised as curiosity. Inside, I found a folder marked property documents, House number 47. My hands trembled as I opened it. And there it was, black ink on white paper. My name nowhere in sight. The owner listed. Mrs. Nasira Saeed, his mother. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. All the air in the room vanished. I sat down, papers in my lap, staring at them until the words blurred through my tears. Every moment of the past few years replayed in my head. The arguments, the decisions, the times I'd asked him to include my name, just for formality, and he'd laughed it off. He'd said, "We're family, Farah. We don't need paperwork between us." And now it all made sense. He didn't include me because he never planned to. I waited for him that night. When he came home, I was sitting in the living room with the documents spread out on the table. He froze. "Saad," I said quietly, "do you want to tell me what this is?" He looked at the papers, then at me, then sighed. As if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "It's just a name on paper, Farah," he said. "It's still our house." "No. Iwisparat. It's your mother's house. I'm just a guest here, aren't I?" His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting. Amy helped us financially, remember? It's only fair." "Fair," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "I worked too, Saad. I sold my jewelry. I saved every rupee. You told me we were equals." He looked away. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. He never saw me as his equal. Not really. He left the room without another word, and I sat there alone, staring at the papers that erased my place in my own home. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about how love can make you blind. Not suddenly, but slowly. It softens the edges of warning signs until you start believing control is care, and silence is peace. By morning, I had made tea, but I couldn't bring myself to pour his cup. The sound of the kettle whistling felt like a scream. When Saad came out of the bedroom, his hair still damp from a shower, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read, somewhere between guilt and irritation. "Farah," he said, "I didn't mean to hurt you. You're taking this too seriously." I looked up from my cup and asked, "If I died tomorrow, would I still be allowed to live in this house today?" He frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind," I said quietly, "that a woman asks when she realizes she's been building a life on someone else's land." He didn't answer. He just exhaled and grabbed his keys. The reaction/action begins. After he left, I sat on the floor with my son's toys scattered around me. Denial was too young to understand what was happening. Just 7 years old, innocent eyes and sticky fingers. He looked at me and said, "Mama, are you crying because Baba shouted?" I smiled weakly and shook my head. "No, baby. Mama's just thinking." But I was more than thinking. I was planning. I had spent my life depending on others for security. My parents, then my husband. I'd never questioned it because I thought loyalty was protection. But now I realized, love without trust is a cage. I decided to know everything. Not just what he told me, but what he hid. For the next few days, I pretended everything was normal. I cooked, I laughed with denial. I even made Saad's favorite biryani. I needed him to think I'd accepted it. But inside, I was collecting every detail. I searched through drawers, old files, cupboards. I checked bank statements, receipts, property taxes. Anything that could tell me when the house was transferred. And then I found it. A bank transaction dated 3 months after we moved in. It showed that Saad had taken a small loan, one I never knew about, to reimburse his mother. That payment coincided with the day the ownership was changed. So she hadn't even helped us financially. He had paid her off, and then given her the house. I remember sitting there, my hands trembling as I realized. This wasn't just manipulation. It was betrayal written in ink. That evening, I decided to confront his mother. She was sitting in the lounge, sipping tea, watching her favorite cereal. The moment she saw me, she smiled, that sharp smile I'd learned to fear. "Farah," she said sweetly, "make sure you wash the curtains tomorrow. They're getting dusty." I sat across from her and said calmly, "Amy, I found the house papers." Her hand froze midair. "Oh, what about them?" "I know it's under your name." She blinked once slowly, then set her cup down. "Saad told you, I see." "Yes," I replied. "He told me yesterday." "Well, good. she said with a hint of smugness. Now you know. It's safer this way. A woman should never own property in her husband's house. It creates tension. I felt my throat tighten. Safer for whom? For the family, she said. You should be grateful. I'm protecting my son's legacy. Her tone was firm, confident, like she believed she was right. And that scared me more than anything. Amy, I said quietly, you may own the house on paper, but this home, every inch of it carries my fingerprints. She looked at me with pity. Paper is what counts, Farah, not fingerprints. That night, I sat in the dark, watching the shadows stretch across the living room walls. I thought about all the women who had been told the same thing. That love is enough, that marriage means trust, that legal rights are unnecessary. It wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about dignity. So the next morning, I went to see a lawyer. He listened patiently as I explained everything. When I finished, he sighed and said, legally, if your name isn't on the property and you didn't sign the deed, it will be difficult to claim ownership. But you might have grounds if your income contributed to the purchase. I showed him proof, salary slips, bank transfers, my jewelry receipts. He nodded. It's not impossible, he said. But it will be messy. Are you ready for that? I hesitated. I wasn't sure. I wasn't ready for public fights or courts. But I was tired of feeling small. Yes, I said finally. I'm ready. That evening, I came home to find Saad waiting for me. He looked uneasy. Where were you? I went to see a lawyer. He froze. What? I wanted to know my rights. He clenched his fists. Farah, are you trying to destroy this family? No, I said softly. I'm trying to save myself before there's nothing left of me. He stared at me, then shook his head and walked out. That was the night he didn't come home. Public consequence begins. When people start whispering, truth has already begun to surface. His mother noticed the shift immediately. I stopped cooking for her, stopped engaging in her daily criticism. I moved my things into Denial's room and locked the door when I slept. Neighbors began asking where Saad was. He had moved in with his mother's cousin for space. That's what he told people, space. As if betrayal only needed distance to heal. But I wasn't staying idle. The lawyer filed a petition that claimed joint contribution, proof that part of my income went into purchasing the property. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was something. And when the legal notice was delivered to the house, his mother's face turned pale. She called me a shameless woman. I said nothing. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she wasn't powerful. She was terrified. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. A week later, Saad showed up at my door. His face looked tired, older somehow. He sat down quietly and said, "Why are you doing this? You're making things worse." I said, "Worse for who? You? Your mother? Or for the woman who believed in you for 12 years? He rubbed his forehead. "Farah, I didn't mean to hurt you. Amy insisted. She wanted to protect me. You know how she is." "And you?" I asked. "What did you want, Saad?" He didn't answer. In that silence, I realized, sometimes the person you love isn't cruel. They're just cowardly. But cowardice can ruin lives too. He left soon after. And I decided, I wouldn't. I wouldn't leave the house I helped build. I wouldn't run from my own story. Days turned into weeks. Silence became my new companion. Heavy but honest. The court process had started, and with it came whispers, judgment, and those looks neighbors give when they want to seem sympathetic but can't hide their curiosity. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel their eyes following me. She's the one who filed a case against her husband's family. But inside me, something had changed. The fear that once filled my chest had turned into something else. Something sharper, clearer. It wasn't anger anymore. It was purpose. I began working longer hours at the small school where I taught English. I took on extra classes, weekend tutoring, even online students. The same money I once used for groceries and birthday decorations was now going to legal fees. And I didn't regret a single rupee. Denial would sometimes sit beside me while I graded papers. "Mama," he'd ask, "why doesn't Baba live with us anymore?" I'd look at him and say softly, "Because Mama and Baba see the world differently right now." He'd think for a moment, then smile. That's okay. I'll see it with you, Mama. And just like that, my son became my strength. A tiny reminder of why I couldn't afford to give up. The turning point. One afternoon my lawyer called. Farah, I've got some good news, he said. The court has accepted the petition for a property review. They're calling both parties next week. For the first time in months I felt my heartbeat quicken, not from fear but from hope. But that same night Saad showed up again. This time he wasn't angry. He looked defeated. He stood at the door, holding a small toy car, Denial's favorite. I came to see him, he said quietly. I nodded and let him in. They played for a while. Laughter echoing through a house that had forgotten how to laugh. And then when Denial fell asleep, Saad sat down across from me. Farah, he said slowly, I want to end this peacefully. Withdraw the case. I'll make sure you and Denial have everything you need. I stared at him. Everything we need? You mean a life inside walls that aren't ours? He exhaled. You don't understand how complicated this is. My mother. Your mother, I interrupted, made a decision that took away my home. And you let her. That's not complicated, Saad. That's betrayal. He looked down. I thought you'd never leave. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't about love. It was about control. I stood up and said quietly, maybe that's the problem. You never thought I could. The court hearing. The day of the hearing was suffocatingly hot. I wore a plain white shower camise, simple, clean, defiant in its calmness. Saad was there, standing beside his mother. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to, her silence said enough. The judge listened to both sides. My lawyer presented every document, bank statements, salary slips, jewelry receipts, even photos of renovation bills I had paid. Saad's lawyer argued that the property title was in his mother's name, and that cultural norms made it inappropriate for the wife to claim ownership. The judge leaned forward and said, this court doesn't deal in cultural norms. It deals in law. For the first time I felt seen. Not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a woman standing on her own side. After the hearing, Saad followed me outside. You really think you'll win? He asked bitterly. I looked at him and said, I already did. The aftermath. Weeks passed before the verdict came. I remember holding my breath as my lawyer read it out. The court ruled that while the property remained legally under his mother's name, I had proven substantial contribution to its purchase, granting me joint residential rights and protection from eviction. It wasn't a full victory, but it was enough. Enough to prove that my voice mattered. Enough to show that silence wasn't the only option. That night I stood by the window watching rain fall over the garden. The same garden I had planted years ago. Tiny seeds that had grown into flowers despite being neglected, stepped on, almost uprooted. They had survived. So had I. The emotional resolution. Months later, things began to settle. Saad moved out permanently. His mother stopped coming around. The house felt quiet. But it was my quiet. I painted the walls a soft cream color. I replaced the heavy curtains with light ones that let sunlight in. And one day, I took Denial by the hand and said, let's write our name on the gate. He laughed. But Mama, we don't own it. I smiled. Maybe not on paper. But ownership isn't always legal, Beta. Sometimes it's emotional. We wrote in chalk just 2 words. Our home. A year later, my story went viral online after a women's rights group shared it anonymously. People called it the house that spoke back. Some said I was brave. Some said I was foolish. But I didn't care. Because for every woman who read it and whispered, that's my story too, I knew it mattered. I began giving small workshops for women, teaching them about financial independence, legal awareness, and emotional resilience. It wasn't activism. It was healing. One day during a session, a young girl asked, Auntie, how did you know when it was time to fight back? I smiled and said, when silence started sounding like surrender. Closing monologue for emotional ending/narration. They said I was breaking a home. But the truth is, I was saving one. A home built on fear isn't a home, it's a prison. Today, my son plays in the same courtyard where I once cried. And every time I hear his laughter, I know I didn't lose a house. I found myself.